Hi everyone, and welcome back to the higher level chess course. Now, last time we had a look at sacrificial attacks with a bit of background, I suppose, from my games. Now, obviously, there are plenty of higher level games other than what I play to look at, but I think it's certainly quite relevant to look at your own games because you can actually see, therefore, where you're going wrong and what you can specifically improve. And I think it's really important to do that in your own games. I'm showing you my games because I feel like some of the themes of the games are particularly relevant. And this week, I want to sort of continue to look at the game that I unexpectedly won that we were looking at last week. So let me just share my screen at the moment and we'll come to it. Okay, so just a quick reminder, I should never have won this game. I think my opponent he was close to winning, but I won't reveal his identity just so I don't embarrass the poor guy. But in this position, I brought the queen across from a3 to d6 to h6 to g5 so that I could attack his king. Because that was the only way that I could possibly get out of this kind of horrible mess. My king is stuck in the corner. I'm very close to being checkmated. Now, the move that was played was queen to d4. The idea really being to come to e4 with the idea of checkmate on g2. And it looks as though that is a good idea. But the issue here is that there's something I can play, which is queen takes pawn. And that immediately stops the checkmate. So now it's just a case of whether black would swap queens or not. There's a bit of, I think there's probably rightly, you could debate whether that's good or not. I still think black has the initiative because of the position of this rook in particular. And also this is quite a dangerous pawn. But I do have chances of my own if I can get this pawn forward. So it's not completely clear what black should do here. The move that I think black perhaps should have played, I'm going to go back a second. So instead of playing queen d4, I think there's a possibility he could have played queen d3. Now it looks as though, I mean, obviously there's got this queen to here, not this one, obviously, because of the rook, but obviously queen to e4, threatening mate in 2. It looks as though white can just attack the black king, which is true. But the question here is whether I can force a perpetual check. So let's just run through a potential line here. Again, the only place I can really go to check the king, and therefore prevent the checkmate by perpetual check or repetitive checks, is here. The king then could come out. So again, I'm looking for potential checks. There aren't really that many. I've got to go here. The king can surprisingly run away, can come over here. If I attack this pawn or take the pawn here, then the king can hide on d8 and there won't be any further checks, which is no good for me because I can't save the game therefore. So queen here, the king then just comes across. And you can notice now that I'm gradually running out of checks. I think perhaps if I did this move, then there would be this in response. And again, I would run out of checks and I would therefore lose the game. So that was actually a very hard line to see. It's 6 moves deep. So I'm not surprised that my opponent was unable to see it. I think it was quite a risky line because obviously the king is going on a run. But the move queen d3 turned out to be would have been the best move there, even though it risked a bit of counterplay against the black king. But after this move, I recapture a pawn. Now, material speaking, we're starting to, well, starting to have to look a little bit more carefully. So I have 5 pawns now against 5 black pawns, which means I've taken, I've leveled up material. That's obviously a good thing because it means that if there are any swaps that take place in the game, then it makes it less of a problem for me to do that, because it means that I have a fairly equal chance of winning or getting a result from the game as my opponent, because material is level. I'm going to show you what happened in the remainder of the game. I'm going to check it from my score sheet that I had. So the move that my opponent played was c3. Now, it strikes me that he was just simply trying to get this pawn down and create almost like counterplay of his own, because I think he realized that, okay, so this queen has become quite dangerous. I think he was hoping I was going to take this pawn here, and then he would advance the pawn down to c2. And that would obviously be quite dangerous, because the pawn that's close to the end is going to be, well, it's almost getting a queen. So this is probably his idea, but that actually wasn't necessary. First of all, it would be much better, I think, to activate one of my pieces. Now, the move that I played, I wonder if you can guess. I'm not saying, by the way, that all of these moves are the strongest possible moves. What I'm saying is the strategy of what I'm playing is important, because if you don't have a positive mentality in the game, you'll find actually you may slip into a defeat more easily than you think. With a positive mentality of playing aggressive moves, threats, CCTV, checks, captures, threats, and violence on the chessboard, then if you keep that mentality going, then actually the moves that you make will be stronger, because you're thinking positively, and that puts your opponent under more pressure. Your opponent is more likely to make a mistake. So instead of allowing this pawn through, I thought, how about rook to d1, hoping that the queen would move. I still feel that black has probably got a decent chance if he just swaps off the queen. The queens, yeah, because here I would have to react like this, and then, well, arguably this rook or the other one could recapture. I feel that, having been two pawns ahead at one point in this game, and also feeling like he was well in command of this game, my opponent probably thought that swapping queens would be a bit like saying, okay, well, almost like admitting that he was wrong when he played his previous couple of moves. And admitting you're wrong in chess is surprisingly difficult, if not in life in general, but in chess in particular. So he probably declined this move on the fact that he thought, well, it would give me a higher chance of a draw. But actually, this may well have been perhaps among the best moves, because of the value of this queen. The move he played, thinking, okay, hoping I would swap, would be rook to d2. But then that's good for me, because if I did swap, let's just see what would happen if I did swap. Well, I suspect chances are he'll take with the pawn. And if I then try to block with my rook, then he'll bring his rook down here, and it will be mate imminently on probably around this square with his second queen. So I don't think that is, well, it's definitely not an option. I'm just going to go back here just to prove the point. So after rook to d2, this move, I declined to take the rook, because I could see there that it wasn't going to help me. Therefore, it's much better to find an alternative, which I wonder if you can see the move that was played in this game for white. Pause the video. Okay, well done if you saw this, because actually the next two moves are vital. Rook to e1. Now, this is a real problem for black, and I would almost say that the game has turned completely now, because what would happen if black did take this rook? Well, white would just play queen to f8, checkmate. The king is very weak here, especially seeing as the queen is so close. Notice that black is kind of obliged to keep this queen on the diagonal. Otherwise, there'll be ways that I can perhaps come to f6, or attack the queen, attack the king along this diagonal. So black has to keep connected to his king here like this. So obviously black can't take the rook. I suppose the same thing would happen if black blocked. Again, I would just capture the rook. Then after the recapture, I would come there, queen f8, checkmate. So that is never an option. He cannot block. Obviously, if he blocks with the queen, that won't help. So there are no checks now that are any use to black. Because I've taken control of that square, black cannot check the king as he would have done before. So the move that was chosen, kind of in desperation, my opponent spent probably 20 minutes or almost 25 minutes spent on this move. A very long time, playing rook to g8. And I think this next move I was really proud of. I'm sure my opponent won't want to see this again if he's watching. But pause the video and see if you can see a winning move for white in this position. Now, given that I want to control the diagonal to black's king, the move that I played was rook to e5, blocking the queen. Now that is a very important move because not only does it block the queen from getting back and defending the king, it also defends that pawn. Notice that black could perhaps have tried to swap, if he'd have had an extra move, to swap the queen off by taking this pawn. And that would remove completely my attacking threat. And that pawn there would probably kill me eventually by getting to the end. So this move does two things. It blocks the queen and, crucially, covers that square and this one as well, just in case. So rook to e5. Now, the threat, if you can see it, can you see the continuation here? What would be my plan? The plan is queen f6 check, and then after rook there, rook to e8 mate. Okay, because the rook is pinned, it can't go back. So that is a very serious threat. And to be honest, there is no way that that black can deal with this. Even a sacrifice, something like that. I mean, that's often a way of, trying to generate something, a sacrifice. The sacrifice wouldn't quite lead to anything, I don't think, because I'm still okay just about here. I've got enough protection. And notice that, I actually, my pieces are covering a lot of squares here. This rook is covering, both these pieces are covering squares here. And luckily, this rook is providing shelter for me on the back rank. So there's no sacrifice ideas for black, sadly. I'll just show you the conclusion of the game. After rook e5, the move h5. I mean, this is as good a move as any. There's nothing that black can do. He's trying to just get his king out, giving his king extra space to go to. But I'm not having any of that. So I'm just going to mop up the pawn, mop up this one as well, just in case. Because obviously I had not very much time here, about 2 minutes left on the clock to complete the game. So I had to be sure that I was going to checkmate them. And if I wasn't sure, then it's better to pick up material as well, just in case. So after queen takes pawn, we've got king comes back to there. So can we find a check? Well, yes, queen f5 check. And can you see the mate in 2 moves after king g7? That's the question. Can you see it? I believe there was a quicker mate. Someone pointed it out after the game, but it's always good to be sure and to make moves that you're confident about. So the move is rook to e7 check. And if the king goes here, well, then we've got mate here. The king went here, so we did exactly the same move. We could go here, but actually I did rook across to h7 checkmate. Okay, what did we learn from that game? What did I learn in particular? I learned that, first of all, never to give up. That's very important in chess, especially, I would say you know, when it's obvious that you're going to lose, you've got to try and use everything that you can to pull back into the game. So what I mean is try and keep your best pieces on the board, particularly your queen, because notice the power of this queen in this game. It was a miraculous recovery, but only because of the queen and the aggression. We have to look for checks, captures, threats, and just violence on the chessboard. I think the key thing here was checks. The threat of a check drove Black actually to make a couple of mistakes that actually made things very bad for him. And he was not able to check my king in response. So that is the second thing. I would also say that you've got to try to activate your pieces in some way. If you're going to defend passively, you'll lose. So you have to play actively in this position, especially when all is lost or appears to be lost. Okay, just before we finish, I want to show you one more quick thing. So this is a game played in 1974 in an international tournament. I think it was one of the qualifying events for the Candidates Tournament. The Candidates Tournament is in order to decide the World Championship, but obviously you've got to qualify for the Candidates Tournament first, called an interzonal tournament. So this is played between the world champion, I believe, just almost the world champion at the time, a guy called Anatoly Karpov. He was a very, very strong player, and the kind of player who, instead of kind of going for sacrificial moves, he prefers to play more positional chess and to sort of grind down the opponent, seize different squares and gain space, and sort of like a boa constrictor, squeeze his opponent to death. And the opponent's surname was Uznica, I believe, from Germany. So White in this position has a bit of an advantage in some ways. If you want to set this up, please do. Why would you choose White in this position? I think it's relatively obvious that White has a small advantage, at least, in the sense, but in one particular sense, I think. And what is that? I think crucially, White just has more space. So although Black has a pawn in White's territory, notice that crucially these two pawns here are restricting a number of Black's pieces, in particular this bishop. That bishop then restricts the ability of this knight to go back, restricts the queen. I would say this bishop is also very badly restricted. And, well, you can imagine also the rooks too. Now, you might think, well, surely if the board is blocked up, then that's the same for White as it is for Black. But I think if we compare pieces, I mean, White's pieces still do have a lot of places to maneuver. And there's ways to progress. So, for example, the bishop can come down here or here. This knight optionally could go on some kind of route. I think either knight could perhaps attack towards Black's king. White's king is completely safe. But I think perhaps the most crucial aspect to this position, I'm going to introduce it to you, is this file. Notice that there's only been a pair of pawns taken from the board. This is something like move number 24 or 23. There's only been one exchange, and that has resulted in an open file. So notice that if White captured this rook, then Black will gain control of the file because he can replace it with another rook. So that's not really what we want. What we want is to be able to take control of the file ourselves. But how? Because if we just perhaps allow our rook to be taken, rook takes rook, and then after queen takes rook, perhaps it's trying to take control of the file, then Black just replaces this rook with another one, helped by the queen. So this is going to be useless. The move here was perhaps one of the most famous moves ever played in chess, in the whole history of chess. It's such an interesting move, very clever idea. I wonder if you can see it now. pause the video and I'll be very impressed if you can spot it. Okay, I'll just play a couple of moves and I'm going to show you this move here. It is bishop to a7. You might think, what? Why? Or wow, optionally. Why or wow? Wow, yes, definitely. Why? Well, we basically want to try to double up our rooks on this file, maybe even triple up with the queen. But currently we can't do that because of the rook, which is threatening to swap off. Now, that rook is now stuck. And to some extent, so is this one. And therefore the queen is too. So basically, white can double up on this file almost at his leisure. Let me just show you the continuation of the game. So I've got the moves here briefly. So after knight e8, trying to get to here, maybe to try to defend the rook. White just clears the path for the rook to come across. Then after knight c7, I mean, what else can black do? Not very much, to be honest. Maybe he can't break with like this because white's got too many pieces threatening this square, so that's not possible. I mean, what can black do? Nothing, hardly. So this is as good a move as any, probably. So then rook back to a1 there. And after queen a7, move bishop to b1 just to secure this rook, just in case. And notice here that white could anytime retract the bishop from that file, and then he has complete control over it. So I love this move. I think it's a really clever move. I'll just show it to you one more time. How do we take control of the file? We block the enemy rook, and then we gradually reorganize our pieces so that we can build up behind. It's like a dam, isn't it? It's like creating a dam and then throwing away the dam, and suddenly the power of white's pieces is thrust upon the opponent like this. And then we can simply, again, just back up our piece and retract the bishop later. So I hope that was very interesting to you. Next week or next lesson, I'm going to show you the continuation of this game a little bit later on. I thought it was really, really interesting. I hope that was useful, or at least relevant to you. That Karpov game there was all about just considering how to progress in the game, recognizing a theme, which is the open file, and then working out a clever way of taking control of it. So I suppose the title of this would be taking control of areas of the board, or files, open files. Now we know that's a really important theme in chess, but I think that's a particularly good demonstration of how to use it. And just to quickly summarize the end of my game, well, try to remain active at all times with your strongest pieces, because then you might be able to turn around the game if you're losing. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.